5 days before Thanksgiving, the day I was supposed to announce our engagement to my entire family, my fiancée left me a voicemail. It wasn't a conversation, it was a declaration. She cheerfully informed me that she was bringing her unemployed ex-boyfriend to my parents' house. She ended the message with 6 words that sealed her fate. He has nowhere to go, just deal with it. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just texted back, I'll let them know. Then, I used the money for her engagement ring to book a flight to Mexico. Our story started like many do, with a spark of opposites attracting. I'm Ethan, 29 years old, a data architect. My world is built on logic, on systems, on finding order in chaos. Chloe, who is 27, was a PR coordinator for a non-profit. Her world was built on passion, on feeling, on what she called doing good, often in the most chaotic way possible. For 3 years it worked. My structure gave her a foundation, and her spontaneity gave my life color. We were, I thought, building a stable system together, a perfect partnership. But looking back, the blueprint for this disaster was always there, hidden in plain sight. If you were to walk through the history of our relationship, you'd find yourself in a museum of red flags, each one a masterpiece of ignored warnings. The first exhibit is from about a year ago, our 2nd anniversary. I had planned a weekend trip for just the 2 of us, a quiet cabin by a lake. I spent weeks getting the details right, booking the perfect place, planning the meals. It was meant to be our escape. A week before we were set to leave, she came to me beaming. She said, "Honey, I have the best news. You know how Jessica and Mark have been fighting. Well, I invited them to come with us for the weekend. They just need a fun getaway to reconnect." I remember just staring at her. I said, "Chloe, that was supposed to be our trip, for our anniversary." She looked at me with that wounded expression she was so good at. She said, "But they're our friends and they're hurting. We can't be selfish, can we? It'll be more fun with more people anyway." I gave in. Of course I did. I didn't want to be the bad guy. I didn't want to be called selfish. So, I spent my anniversary weekend listening to another couple argue while the woman I loved played therapist. That was the first time I realized her definition of goodness often came at my expense. The next exhibit in the museum is a financial one. We had a joint credit card for shared expenses, groceries, bills, things like that. One day, I got an alert on my phone, a charge for $5,000. It was a donation to the very non-profit she worked for. I called her immediately. I said, "Chloe, what is this $5,000 charge? We didn't talk about this." Her voice was defensive. She said, "It was for the annual fundraising drive. We were so close to our goal and I knew we could help push it over the edge. It's for a good cause, Ethan." I tried to explain. I said, "It is a good cause, but that's a significant amount of money from our shared account. That's something we decide on together." Her response cut me deep. She said, "God, why do you have to be so logical and cold about everything? It's about helping people. I can't believe you're getting upset about helping people." She made me feel like a villain for wanting a conversation about our finances. She used her job, her manufactured moral high ground, as a shield against any accountability. I let it go, again. And then there was Dylan, the ghost of relationship past. He wasn't just an ex-boyfriend she was friends with. He was her perpetual project, her favorite charity case. Dylan, the 28-year-old musician, who never quite made it, always seemed to have a life-altering crisis, right when Chloe and I hit a major milestone. When we decided to move in together, his band suddenly broke up. When I first told her I loved her, he got evicted. It was a pattern, a predictable algorithm of manufactured drama. I remember one night we were out for dinner, a rare, quiet evening. She saw him across the restaurant looking miserable. She said, "Oh my God, it's Dylan. He looks awful. I just need to go say hi." She went over to his table. She stayed there for 45 minutes. I sat at our table alone, watching my fiancée hold her ex-boyfriend's hand and listen to him complain about his creative struggles. When she finally came back, our food was cold. She didn't even notice. She just said, "He's going through so much. I'm so glad we were here." She said "we," but I wasn't a part of that conversation. I was just the guy paying the bill. All of these moments, these flashing red lights, led us to this Thanksgiving. This wasn't just any holiday. It was supposed to be the one. I had spoken to my parents. My sister Olivia was in on the plan. This was the weekend I was going to officially ask Chloe to marry me in front of my entire family. I had spent 2 months' salary on an engagement ring, a beautiful classic piece I had designed, based on a picture she'd bookmarked a year ago. It was sitting in a box in my sock drawer. That ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of a future, a promise of a stable, respectful partnership. It was the foundation of the next phase of the system we were supposed to be building together. A system she was about to take a sledgehammer to with a single cheerful voicemail. My job isn't about emotion. It's about architecture. I design, build, and maintain complex data systems. When a component in a system fails, you don't get angry at it. You don't try to reason with it. You diagnose the problem, you isolate the faulty component, and you execute a solution to protect the integrity of the overall structure. Chloe's voicemail wasn't a relationship problem. It was a system failure. The input was an illogical and disrespectful demand. The desired output was the preservation of my own dignity and my family's peace. The interfering variables were Chloe and Dylan. The solution, therefore, wasn't to argue or to fight. It was to remove the primary node myself from the equation entirely. My revenge wouldn't be emotional. It would be procedural, a cold, calculated, and perfectly executed move. So I began the process. Step 1. Data collection and preservation. I listened to her voicemail one more time, not for the content, but for the tone. The cheerful, self-assured delivery was the most damning evidence of all. I saved the audio file. I created a new encrypted folder on my hard drive. I named it Project Thanksgiving. I placed the audio file inside. Then I took a screenshot of her follow-up text, the one with the string of happy heart emojis. That went into the folder as well. Data secured. Evidence logged. Step 2. Strategic communication. I opened my email client. I composed a message to my family's group thread. Every word was chosen with surgical precision. I wrote, "Team, a quick and unfortunate update. We've had a critical server failure at work that requires an emergency migration over the holiday weekend. It's an all-hands-on-deck situation, and unfortunately that means I will not be able to make it for Thanksgiving. I am incredibly disappointed and was looking forward to seeing you all." I paused, then added the crucial line. "Chloe is aware and might still come to join you all, so please make her feel welcome." I hit send. The message was perfect. It was professional, apologetic, and completely non-negotiable. It also placed the entire burden of the next move squarely on her shoulders without her even knowing it. Step 3. Reallocation of resources. I opened a new browser window. In one tab, I had my online banking portal open, showing the substantial amount I had set aside for her engagement ring. The numbers stared back at me, a digital monument to a future that had just been deleted. In the next tab, I had a travel website. I typed best places for a solo traveler to disconnect into the search bar. The first result that popped up was a luxury eco-lodge in Costa Rica. I saw pictures of secluded beaches, infinity pools, overlooking the jungle and quiet minimalist suites. It was the visual definition of peace, of order. I didn't hesitate. I used the engagement ring fund. I booked a first-class ticket leaving the next evening. I reserved the master suite with an ocean view for 5 nights. This wasn't a purchase. It was a resource transfer. I was divesting from a failed project and reinvesting the capital into a system recovery plan for myself. The confirmation email arrived instantly. Project Thanksgiving had been funded. Step 4. Erecting the firewall. The final part of the plan was to ensure complete operational silence. I went into my phone's settings, read receipts off, location services off. Then, I went into my work email and set up an automated reply. It read, "Thank you for your message. Due to an urgent and ongoing server migration, I will have limited to no access to email until Monday. I will respond then." Finally, I sent one last brief text message to my sister Olivia. "Something has come up. I am safe. I will explain everything later. Trust me." Then I put my phone on airplane mode. The system was now secure. The firewall was active. All that was left to do was to pack a bag and watch the faulty components crash against the defenses I had just built. The flight to Costa Rica was a system reboot. As the plane ascended, I felt the weight of the last 3 years begin to lift. It wasn't just about Chloe, or Dylan, or Thanksgiving. It was the slow, creeping realization that the architecture of my life had been compromised by a persistent, invasive malware of disrespect, and I was finally running the antivirus program. The eco-lodge was exactly as advertised, a sanctuary of silence. My suite was a clean, minimalist space of wood and glass, overlooking an ocean so blue it seemed digitally enhanced. The only sounds were the rhythmic crash of waves on the shore and the distant calls of howler monkeys in the jungle canopy. For the first time in a long time, there was no noise, no drama, just clean data. I spent the first day walking on the black sand beach, letting the warm Pacific water wash over my feet. I ate a simple meal of fresh fish and rice, and I read a book without interruption. It wasn't loneliness. It was a profound sense of peace. It was the feeling of a system operating at 100% efficiency, with no background processes draining its resources. Meanwhile, a storm was brewing in another universe, a universe I could observe from a safe distance, through the tiny portal of my phone screen, which I only checked once a day. The incoming data logs were illuminating. The first batch of messages arrived on Tuesday. At 2:15 p.m., a text from Chloe. "Hey babe, just thinking about what Dylan should wear for Thursday. Should he go for a casual sweater or something? A little more dressed up. Want him to make a good first impression." At 4:30 p.m., "He's really excited, you know. He keeps asking me questions about your family. He asked if your dad likes red wine, which I thought was sweet. I told him your dad prefers whiskey, but it's the thought that counts, right? At 8 p.m., hope work isn't too crazy. Thinking of you. Can't wait for Thursday." I read them while sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I took a sip of my cocktail. I did not reply. Wednesday was when the frequency of the incoming data packets started to increase. At 9:07 a.m. morning sleepyhead, I'm on my way to pick up the pies for tomorrow. Dylan is actually coming with me, he wanted to help. Isn't that nice? At 11:30 a.m. Okay, got the pies, 1 pumpkin, 1 pecan. Dylan says pecan is his favorite. I told him your mum makes the best, but this will have to do, LOL. That afternoon, I received a text from my sister Olivia. It just said, "Hey, everything okay? Mum told us about the work emergency. Sounds rough. Just checking in." I waited a few moments, then typed back a simple reply. "I'm fine. Don't worry. We'll talk soon." She sent back a single thumbs up emoji. The alliance was confirmed. Then the data stream from Chloe began to show signs of system corruption. At 2:45 p.m., "Hey, are you getting my texts? Just wanted to confirm what time we should leave tomorrow." At 4 p.m., "Ethan, your phone must be off. We're planning to leave around 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon to beat the traffic. Hope that works for you." At 5:30 p.m., "Seriously, where are you? I'm starting to get a little worried. Call me when you get this." The final message of the night came in at 7:19 p.m. Her tone had shifted from cheerful to strained. "Okay, I guess your phone died. I'm just going to assume the plan is still on. We'll be there. I love you." I read that last message as my room service arrived. I put the phone down face down on the nightstand. I ate my dinner in complete silence, listening to the symphony of the jungle outside my window. There was a unique and deeply satisfying pleasure in observing a chaotic system break down from the serene, controlled environment of my own making. She had built this house of cards on a foundation of assumptions and disrespect. All I had done was refuse to be the card at the bottom. After that last text on Wednesday evening, there was nothing, a complete communication blackout for almost 24 hours. And I knew exactly what that silence meant. It was the silence of travel. The silence of 2 people in a car driving towards a family gathering living in a bubble of delusion. One of them believing she was a benevolent saint, the other just happy for a free meal. Both of them completely unaware that they weren't driving toward a warm family welcome. They were driving straight into an ambush, and I was thousands of miles away, perfectly calm, waiting for the inevitable system crash notification. The storm was about to hit. I didn't get the full story of the Thanksgiving massacre until later that night. I was on my 3rd cocktail watching the tide come in, when my phone, which I had briefly switched on to check on my sister, lit up with an incoming call from Olivia. I answered. She didn't even say hello. She just said, "Oh my God, Ethan, you are a legend. An absolute stone-cold legend. You have to hear what just happened." And then she told me everything. It was better than I ever could have imagined. She said they arrived at exactly 3:15. Chloe, all smiles, was holding a pecan pie. And right behind her, looking awkward and out of place in a cheap blazer, was Dylan holding a pumpkin pie. Mom opened the door, her face lit up in a welcoming smile. Olivia said Mom went to hug Chloe and then stopped dead in her tracks looking at Dylan. Her smile didn't disappear, but it froze. It became a mask. "My mother," said Chloe, "dear. So wonderful to see you. And, who is this?" Her voice was perfectly polite, but Olivia, who knows Mom's codes, said it was dripping with ice. Chloe's smile became a little too bright. She said, "This is Dylan. He's a friend of mine. His family is out of town and he had nowhere to go, so I told him he could join us. Ethan said it was totally fine." Olivia said this was the moment the bomb went off. My mother kept her polite, frozen smile and tilted her head. She said in a voice as sweet as poison, "Oh, but Ethan isn't coming, dear. He had a terrible work emergency. He won't be here all weekend. Didn't he tell you?" According to Olivia, the color completely drained from Chloe's face. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. She started to stammer something like, "Oh, the work thing, yes, of course he mentioned it, I must have forgotten." But the damage was done. The lie had been exposed on the doorstep in front of everyone. They still let them in, of course. My parents are nothing if not polite, but the atmosphere inside turned arctic. My dad, a man of very few words, shook Dylan's hand with a grip. Olivia described as testing for structural weaknesses, and then they all sat down for dinner. This is where my father, the quiet, unassuming engineer, became a master interrogator. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He just asked questions. Simple, direct, soul-destroying questions. He started with Dylan. He said, "So Dylan, Chloe tells us you're a musician." Dylan puffed out his chest a little. He said, "Yes, sir. I'm a singer-songwriter, mostly indie folk stuff." My dad took a slow sip of his whiskey. He said, "Is that a profitable line of work?" Dylan stammered. He said, "Well, the art is what's important. But I have a podcast too, and I'm in a transitional phase with my career right now." My dad just nodded slowly. "A transitional phase. I see." Then he turned to Chloe. "And Chloe, how long have you two known each other?" Chloe, who was desperately trying to cut her turkey, said, "Oh, a long time. We dated for a few years, but we've been great friends ever since." My dad looked back at Dylan. He said, "And why did you two break up?" Olivia said. Chloe almost choked on her wine. Dylan looked at Chloe in a panic, and he mumbled something about growing in different directions. But the real star of the show, Olivia said, was my Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol, who believes wine is a truth serum. After her second glass of Chardonnay, she leaned forward, a look of genuine, innocent curiosity on her face. She said, "So Dylan, where are you living these days? Your parents must miss you during the holidays." Dylan shifted in his seat. He said, "Actually, I'm kind of between places right now. Just crashing with friends." Aunt Carol's eyes widened. "Oh, you're homeless, Chloe. You are just a saint for bringing him here. A real humanitarian." Chloe forced a laugh. She said, "He's not homeless, Aunt Carol. He's just figuring things out." The interrogation continued through the main course. My dad found out Dylan was unemployed, had been for 6 months, and had no plans for the future beyond letting the universe guide him. Then came the moment that will go down in our family's history. The moment the dinner table fell into a silence so complete you could hear the gravy congealing. Aunt Carol put down her fork, looked directly at Chloe with a bright, curious smile and said, "Let me just make sure I have this all straight, dear. You brought your unemployed ex-boyfriend, whom you dated for 4 years, to meet your current boyfriend's entire family, for the first time, at a major holiday dinner that your current boyfriend isn't even at. Is that right? That is just fascinating." Olivia said you could have heard a pin drop. Chloe's face was beet red. Dylan looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Chloe just stared at her plate, unable to form a single word. They didn't stay for dessert. They mumbled some excuse about having to be somewhere else and practically ran out the door. Olivia said Dylan tried to grab one of the leftover containers Mom had packed, but Dad gave him a look so cold it could have flash-frozen a volcano. They left empty-handed. As soon as the door closed, Olivia said the entire family just looked at each other for a second and then they all burst out laughing. My dad walked over to the whiskey bottle, poured himself another glass, raised it in the air and just said, "To Ethan." I got back from Costa Rica on a Sunday night, tanned, rested, and with a system that had been fully debugged. The first call from Chloe came before I had even finished unpacking. I let it go to voicemail. The second, third, and fourth calls met the same fate. On the fifth call, I answered. Her voice was not a voice. It was a shriek, a torrent of unprocessed, chaotic data. She screamed, "Where were you? You just disappeared. You humiliated me in front of your entire family." I held the phone a few inches from my ear. I let her finish. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke. My voice was calm. I said, "You told me to deal with it, so I did. I removed myself from a situation I never agreed to be in." She screamed again. She said, "You were supposed to be my partner. You were supposed to back me up. You made me look like a fool." I said, "No, Chloe. You made yourself look like a fool. You showed up to my family's home with your ex-boyfriend as your date. I just wasn't there to witness it." There was a moment of silence. I could hear her struggling to process the logic. Then she tried a different tactic. She said, "My friends think you're a monster. My family thinks you're a coward." I said, "And my family thinks you're the tacky girl who brought her ex to Thanksgiving." It seems we both made an impression. I hung up. The next phase of her operation was predictable. A public relations campaign waged on social media. She posted a long, rambling status on Facebook about the pain of being a compassionate person in a world of insecure men. She painted herself as a martyr, a saint who was punished for the crime of having a big heart. Her friends, the ones who only had her side of the data, flooded the comments with their support. "You deserve better, hun. Men are so fragile." I didn't engage. I didn't have to. My sister Olivia did it for me. She left a single devastating comment on the post. She wrote, "Was it compassion when you lied to my mother's face on her doorstep saying, 'Ethan knew you were coming'? Or was it compassion when you brought an ex you cheated with to the dinner where you were supposed to announce your engagement?" Just collecting data. Chloe deleted the comment within minutes, but it was too late. The screenshot was already making the rounds in our family group chat, and as I would later find out, among our mutual friends. One of those friends, a guy named Mark, called me to try and mediate. He said, "Dude, I think you were a little harsh. She was just trying to help a guy down on his luck." I didn't argue. I just said, "Let me send you something." I emailed him the audio file of her voicemail, the one where she cheerfully told me to deal with it. 10 minutes later, I got a text back from him. All it said was, "Wow. Okay. Never mind. You have my full support." The final desperate move came that weekend. Chloe and Dylan drove to my parents' house, unannounced. They wanted to apologize in person and explain their side. My mother called me as soon as she saw them pull up. She put me on speaker. I heard my dad's voice in the background, calm but firm through the closed door. He said, "You have 10 seconds to get off my property before I call the police." Chloe started crying. She said, "We just want to talk. This is all a misunderstanding." My dad's voice was like ice. He said, "There is no misunderstanding. You disrespected my son, you disrespected my wife, and you disrespected my home. There is nothing left to talk about." They left before he even finished dialing the number. Later that night, as I was processing all the fallout, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I suddenly understood the perfect poetic justice of it all. She had wanted to use my family as a stage, as a backdrop to perform her grand play of performative kindness. She wanted to hold up Dylan, her broken project, and have my family be the mirror that reflected back her own image as a savior, a wonderful, compassionate woman. But a mirror is a dangerous thing. It doesn't lie. It only reflects what's put in front of it. And when she stood in front of my family holding her disrespect and her deception, the mirror didn't show her a savior. It showed her exactly what she was. Someone who would use anyone, even the people she claimed to love, as props in her own personal drama. She wanted to force my family to accept an outsider, and in the end, the only person who was cast out was her. That is the mirror effect. A perfect, logical, and inescapable reflection of the truth. The weeks that followed Thanksgiving were an exercise in comparative analysis, a real-time study of two diverging systems. On one side, there was Chloe's world. I got the updates from Olivia, who was still connected to a few of their mutual friends. It was a slow, predictable system crash. Chloe and Dylan, as everyone had expected, were officially a couple again. He had moved into her tiny studio apartment, the same one she used to complain was too small for even one person. Her social media, once a curated gallery of righteous causes and brunch photos, became quieter. The few posts she made were vague, passive-aggressive quotes about discovering who your real friends are. According to Olivia's sources, the reality was grim. Dylan was still unemployed, his grand artistic ambitions apparently not extending to filling out a job application. Chloe was paying for everything. The compassion she was so proud of now had a price tag, and it was coming due every month with the rent. They were arguing. A lot. Mostly about money. The romantic ideal of the struggling artist she was saving had collided with the harsh reality of a freeloader who used her Wi-Fi to play video games all day. The karma was not loud or explosive. It was a quiet, grinding, self-inflicted misery. The exact future she had chosen. My world, on the other hand, was undergoing a system-wide upgrade. With the constant drain of Chloe's drama removed from my life, my focus at work sharpened to a razor's edge. The complex project I'd been wrestling with for months suddenly became clear. I untangled the knots, streamlined the architecture, and delivered the solution 3 weeks ahead of schedule. My boss called me into his office. He didn't just praise the work, he gave me a promotion. Senior Data Architect. It came with a significant pay raise. I also went back to the gym, something I'd let slide while trying to manage Chloe's chaotic social life. I started running again, lifting weights, feeling the satisfying burn of rebuilding my own strength. Each day I felt lighter, more efficient, more myself. It was at the gym about a month after Thanksgiving that I met Sophia. She was 28, a financial analyst, and she had this incredibly sharp, intelligent way of looking at the world. We started talking between sets, and the conversation was effortless. A few days later, we went out for coffee. She asked me about my last relationship, and for some reason I decided to just tell her the whole unvarnished truth, the Thanksgiving story, the voicemail, the trip to Costa Rica. When I finished, I expected a look of shock, or maybe even pity. Instead, she just stared at me for a second, and then she let out a loud, genuine laugh. She said, "Wait, so let me get this straight." Her solution to her ex-boyfriend's problem was to volunteer your family on a major holiday without your consent, and then tell you to just deal with it. I nodded. She shook her head, still smiling. She said, "That's not compassion, Ethan. That's grade A narcissism." She wasn't helping him. She was using him and you and your family as props to make herself feel like a saint. What you did wasn't running away. It was a brilliant, logical, and perfectly executed extraction from a hostile situation. I'd have done the same thing, except I probably would have picked Europe. Talking to her was like talking to someone who spoke my language. She understood systems. She understood cause and effect. She saw the logic in my actions because she operated on the same principles of respect and mutual consent. Christmas that year was a world away from the disaster of Thanksgiving. It was just our family. It was warm and peaceful and full of laughter. At dinner, my dad stood up to make a toast. He raised his glass and said, "I'd like to make a toast. To family, to good food, and to strong, well-enforced boundaries." Everyone laughed and clinked their glasses. My sister told me later that my dad had printed a screenshot from the security camera, the exact moment he was pointing at Dylan and calling him a loser, and had it framed in his home office. My family hadn't just supported me. They had turned my victory into a piece of celebratory folklore. It was during that peaceful holiday, thinking about how different my life was, that I finally understood the core of Chloe's malfunction. When I was with Sophia, a woman who operated on logic and mutual respect, I finally had enough distance to analyze the flawed code in Chloe's thinking. The problem wasn't that she wanted to help Dylan. The problem was that she needed to help Dylan. She had fallen into the toxic charity trap. Her goodness wasn't a selfless gift she gave to the world. It was a drug she used to get high on her own moral superiority. She needed a project, a broken person to fix, because it made her feel powerful. It made her feel important. And to satisfy that addiction, she was willing to sacrifice anything and anyone, my feelings, my family's holiday, our entire future. Her kindness wasn't a gift. It was a burden, and she expected everyone else to carry the weight. I'm sitting in my new apartment. It's on the 17th floor, and the window looks out over the entire city, a sprawling network of lights and data streams. It's quiet up here. The chaos of the streets below is just a silent, flowing river of light. This is the kind of quiet I've been craving. The quiet of a system that is perfectly balanced, where every component is functioning exactly as it should. It's been months since the Thanksgiving incident, but it's only now in this silence that the final analysis has become crystal clear. For a long time, I replayed the events in my head, analyzing the data points, the lies, the manipulation, the sheer audacity of it all. I focused on the act itself, the act of her bringing him to my family's home. But I was wrong. I was looking at the symptom, not the disease. The relationship didn't end when she showed up with Dylan. The relationship ended 5 days earlier in the sterile silence of my office with a single voicemail. It ended with 3 simple words: deal with it. Those 3 words were the most important piece of data she ever gave me. Think about it. She didn't say, "Can we talk about this?" She didn't say, "I know this is a lot to ask, but it's important to me." She didn't even say, "I've made a decision, and I hope you can understand." She said, "Deal with it." It wasn't a request. It was a command. It wasn't an invitation into a partnership. It was a declaration of her role as the system administrator and my role as a minor process, a background task. In that moment, she wasn't seeing me as her partner, her equal, the man she was supposed to be building a future with. She saw me as an obstacle, a logistical problem to be managed, a line item on her agenda. Deal with it was her way of saying, my needs are the primary function of this system. Your feelings are a variable that must be contained. Your family is a resource that I have the authority to allocate. The Thanksgiving dinner was just the catastrophic system crash that resulted from that single line of corrupt code. And just when I thought the old system had been fully decommissioned, I received one last pathetic ping from the ghost in the machine. A few weeks ago, I got a notification on my phone. It was from LinkedIn. Dylan has viewed your profile. An hour later, another notification. Chloe has viewed your profile. I stared at the screen, and I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a profound sense of pity. They were still running diagnostics on a system they had crashed, still trying to access data from a server they had been permanently firewalled from. They were checking up on me, looking for a sign of failure, a hint that my new system was unstable without them. They were looking for a vulnerability. So I gave them a final status report. I smiled. Then I opened my profile. I updated my job title to the new promotion I had received, Senior Data Architect. And then just for them, I added a single line to my professional summary. It now reads, specializing in designing and implementing robust, scalable systems and building strong, unbreakable boundaries. I hit save. Checkmate. And that brings me to the final conclusion of this entire project. To you, the quiet strategists, the builders, the men who believe in logic and order and respect, you will inevitably encounter faulty components in your life. People who operate on chaotic, selfish code. People who see your kindness not as a gift, but as a system vulnerability to be exploited. When you encounter a component like this, your first instinct might be to try and fix it, to rewrite its code, to reason with it, to make it see that its erratic behavior is destabilizing the entire system. This is a waste of resources. You cannot debug a person who does not see their own corruption. You cannot patch a system that is fundamentally flawed by design. When someone shows you through their words or their actions that they do not respect you, believe them. They are providing you with the most critical data you will ever receive. And your only logical, efficient, and self-preserving response is to do exactly what a good architect would do. You don't get angry. You don't negotiate with the faulty component. You calmly and methodically isolate it. You revoke its access permissions, and you protect the integrity of your own system. Because your dignity, your peace of mind, your self-respect, that is the most important system you will ever be responsible for building and maintaining. I look away from the window, from the river of lights that represents a world of chaos I am no longer a part of. Sophia walks into the room, holding 2 glasses of wine. She smiles, and her smile is not a mask or a performance. It's just clean, simple, authentic data. A new system, a better architecture, built on a foundation of mutual respect. And it is incredibly stable.